everyone does things with their best intention. I really believe that, right? Everyone thinks they're doing what's best, whether it be for them, for others, whatever it is, but everyone thinks they're doing their best. I think that's fundamentally the case. And so I think there's two tools here specifically. The first tool is like, asking a question versus saying something, right? Which is, if you go in, like you said, and guns blazing, even if you put in the thank you at the beginning, they're not going to hear it. All they hear is someone telling them that, they suck, they wasn't good enough, et cetera, et cetera. You don't want that. Nobody wants that. Nobody wants to hear that. You don't want to say that either. So the first tool is ask questions instead. So welcome, guys. This is our next episode of our podcast here. And we have an amazing, amazing guest together with us today to speak about a very important topic, relationships, but specifically with your parents. What does that mean, right? And Maria, when we came in today, you actually had a lot to already share with us. I think you have such a wealth of experience. You've gone through so much in your life and you've come out of it so strong. And it's so beautiful to see. I've known Maria for a few years now, and every time we chat, it's just warm butterflies definitely that come up. True. And maybe Maria can introduce yourself a little bit to the audience and kind of tell them, who you are, a little bit about you, and perhaps what does this picture mean to you?
Yes. Thank you so much, Conrad. I'm Priya. It's very, very nice to be here. And so a bit about myself. I'm 30 years old. I'm originally from Mexico, was born and raised there. And then I've been living in France, Switzerland, Hong Kong, now Singapore, soon Dubai. And I'm a lawyer by training. Been working in the legal sector for the last 10 years. Now in maritime, but in parallel to this, I've also always been passionate about personal growth, health. I'm a Chopra certified health teacher in Ayurveda.
Wow, that's crazy. I didn't know that. What?
Did you know that?
I didn't know.
Ayurveda, we have a lot to talk about.
Ayurveda is amazing. So in parallel to all this, I've also always been trying to just ask the important questions. And so that's a bit about me and about what you asked about this.
We got two happy people holding some...
So I made this earlier because Conrad was like, okay, can you just draw what is like parents' concept to you? And I'm like, okay, what do I do? And then, I put two people without any specific signs of gender because I personally, I'm a very open person in that sense. I think that a parent is who looks out for you, who takes care of you, regardless of where you came from biologically.
Oh, wow. Okay, I love that. Yeah.
So I approach that in that sense. And then the son or daughter is in the middle because you are like protected by your parents and it's something that both want. So they did that on purpose. On the side, each parent has their own baggage. But in the middle, you have hearts because I think that parents will always, in my opinion, come from a place of love.
Wow.
And another story is whether that comes as expected and all that, but that's the main connection with the kid. Mm-hmm. And sometimes we forget that our parents have their own baggage from their parents, who got it from their parents.
Right, this could be like a whole chain here, definitely.
Exactly.
Chain of generational trauma.
Yes. So I think I approach it like this.
No, I love that, Maria. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I think like it really blends into, one of the big things that we want to accomplish with this podcast, which is like to show different perspectives of the same phenomenon that we see in the world, right? Parents and, I guess caregiving in a way. We've all had different experiences with it. And I think maybe it might be interesting for us to kind of lay out a little bit of our experience to kind of share with the audience, like, you might have similar experience as us. And what we're hoping to do here is to kind of show you different ways to interpret the things that you've gone through, because life is tough, right? Mm-hmm. Your reality is real and there's no denying that. But what you can do is to have, different perspectives and understandings of the situation to help you overcome these challenges that you have, to come out stronger, to come out more of your best self, wherever you want to be, more of your authentic, inner core. So I think that's really a little bit of what we're doing here. Maybe we can start with Priya. Priya, can you tell us a bit about your family?
Sure. I think when you were saying all those things, the thing that came up to my mind is, of course, my dad. I'm close to both my mom and dad, but of course, the relationship have been a bit. It has evolved so much, especially in the span of the past 4 years, due to some life events. I think it brought us so much closer at the end of the day because we learned so much about each other. And of course, it wasn't all bed of roses, right? There were a lot of separation, and then there was like coming back together. So I think the relationship with my parents have been it's been something that is so special, but it took me a while to accept it and understand that, like you rightfully put the hardship there, right? They always come from a place of love. And that is something that I used to not accept it because I used to feel like, how does that action show love? Like, love is this to me. How come? Like, other parents are showing love by listening. How come you're showing love by maybe scolding me, right? But now I really understand. And one thing that I would say I remember about my dad is that he have made all the key calls in my life. Like, for example, he forced me to get braces. I mean, now when I look back, because like I mentioned, my dad, like just to give context, my dad traveled a lot for work. So I never really had like a fatherly figure around me because he was mostly overseas for over 20 years of my life. He was in different parts of the world. So it's only during holidays I go there, and it was never really like a constant figure. So I've always had that grudge, especially in my early 20s, where I felt like, how come you were never really there physically? But then when I realized all the key calls in my life, like example, forcing me to get braces, and he literally paid for my LASIK surgery at the age of 19. And he said, you have to do it. And I'm like, now when I look back, I'm so thankful because these decisions were made by him from a distance, right? He literally said, you have to get a LASIK. And I was like, but I don't want to. And then, he kept forcing me to get my driving license, which I didn't. So it's like, so these things is his way of showing love because he knows that these things will equip me and make me better. I mean, not just physically, but enable me to like have a better life. I think that's why every key call that he made have been, from his point of view, the best thing for me. But it took me a while to understand. Yeah. So I think like relationships are, especially with parents, the moment you try to understand their perspective, I feel it will evolve.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that's a very good example of how they come from a place of love. I think that when you become a parent, there are no instructions, no manual. So I think they're doing their best. Even, for example, me, I'm soon, hopefully, planning to become a mother. Woo! Let's see how that goes. And I realized just yesterday, actually, I was like, I can remember as if it was yesterday when I was a kid. And then tomorrow, maybe I'll be a mother. And then I'll see my kid, and then I will tell my kid, I was a kid not a long time ago. I mean it. I mean it. So my point is that parents sometimes are just figuring it out. Like, I think we need to give them some slack. We sometimes are very hard on, at least me, I think I've been very hard on my parents. I expected them to be perfect parents, but it's like now that I'm growing up and becoming soon maybe a mother, I realize like they're just doing their best. It's good to come from a place from compassion. That's how they learn themselves to do the parenting. Yeah. So
Can you tell us about your upbringing? Like, I would love to learn more about that.
Yeah, it's very interesting because so as I said, I was born and raised in Mexico, and I grew up with my parents together only until I was 7. So I have very short memories of having 2 parents together. And then when I was 7, they divorced. It was a very turbulent divorce, very, very turbulent. And then as of there, it was very hard for me to choose. I remember when they asked me, who do you want to live? How can you ask that to a 7, 8-year-old?
Can't.
I was just
like,
there's no answer. Like I was just like, I want both, right? So then, because for me it was so difficult to choose, I kept jumping from one to another. Like my sister, for example, no, from day one, she was always with my mom. But I was periods with my dad, periods with my mom, periods with my dad, periods with my mom. And then, so my upbringing was a bit with one parent in one house, one parent in another house. Sometimes one parent trying to do the role of 2, because also they wouldn't talk to each other.
Yeah.
And so that was a bit tricky, especially during many years I grew up without a mother's role. I spent more time with my dad. And when I was with my dad, I mean, it's very complicated, but he didn't allow me to talk to my mom or see my mom. So I spent many years without knowing about her. And then he would tell me, no, but I'm also doing the mother role. But I was like, that doesn't make sense, right?
Right.
So, but then after many years, I kind of escaped. It was very dramatic, like a Mexican soap opera.
Really? So you
Yeah.
had the whole like, getaway car and everything, like that kind of impression?
Yeah, so
Oh,
it was
no.
just, one day I was walking on the street in my city and I saw my mom and my sister in a restaurant sitting there. And I was like shaking her. I told my dad, like, they're there. Can I just go quickly and say hi? Like just a
Wow.
quick hi.
Wow.
And then he was like, okay, but I'll be waiting here. Quick. So then I went. And then, well, it's a long story, but basically I never came back. I just stayed with them. But then my dad with time accepted it. And as I said, we cannot be too hard on our parents. I know now after 20 years that was his best. He had his reasons.
Correct.
He also is not perfect, right? And he has apologized for his mistakes. And now there's like a beautiful, perfect synergy. There's peace between all of us. Me taking that step to kind of go with my mom brought my sister back to my dad because I also didn't talk for years.
Wow.
So yeah, as I said, my parenting story has a lot of anecdotes, but long story short, I'm very grateful for my parents and I'm grateful they divorced. When my world came to an end when I was 7, I didn't understand, but now I realize that thanks to that, we all have better lives. And I take lessons now that I'm married myself. I choose my partner very well. I think I know what it means for a kid to go through a parent separation. So Asim and I, my husband and I, have very clear, how to approach conflict. Because there's always conflict in a marriage, but maybe not doing it in front of kids or, so that's a little bit of what's there about my parenting story.
No, Maria, thank you so much for sharing. I think it's a wonderful, retelling of your experience that obviously came with a lot of hardship, right? And I can actually resonate a lot with it. I'll tell my story in a second, but I think what stood out to me the most is, you've had your kind of makeup experience with them. Your dad apologized to you, which I think is beautiful. I think having the ability to come back and say, hey, you know what? I wasn't the best self I could have been when I was raising you. And I'm sorry about that.
Yes.
That's powerful,
Yes.
right? And I do wonder, like, if that apology didn't come through, like, how might you still feel about that? Well, I'm sure you've kind of processed it a lot throughout your many experiences, but it definitely helped knowing that, he came to terms with it as well. So I think, like, you said something very right, even when Priya was sharing, is like, parents perhaps didn't choose to be parents, right? Some that did choose weren't ready, right? And no one was really ready for parenthood. Yes. What is ready, right? Like, know, and yes, there's courses out there. Yes, there's things you can learn, but there's only so much you can actually apply when the time happens. And most people are still in the stage of life where they're trying to deal with, their own basic needs, right? Survival. They're trying to make sure their family is well fed. There's a lot of things that are on their mind, and the emotional part of it is just so far beyond what they're currently thinking about right now that it's really hard to blame any of them for what they've done. But again, I think like it's those experiences that have shaped you, though, to make you the person you are today, right? It's made you stronger. Maybe in the moment you don't realize it, but I think looking back, you definitely can see that.
That's beautiful, Conrad. Yes, it is. Now I'm like, thank you, God, for sending these things that in the moment felt like, why is this happening to me? And this is horrible. But now that I had the patience or resilience to, not fall too much during the process, I'm like, that made me the person that I am today. And I know it sounds very cliche, but it's true. And I think it was Priya in the beginning of the conversation or it was you. I don't know, someone said that life has hardships unavoidably. But I think this topic of parents reminded me that it's actually also thanks to my parents that I have been able to overcome those hardships. So even though they've been having their mistakes, at the end of the day, they were able to transfer me their love and support. And it's like, no, this is not the end. Like, I know that I have resources and people that believe in me, and that there's no excuse to give up.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah. Again, such a powerful, experience that you've had. And thank you so much for sharing. And, for me to share my story too, was like my parents divorced when I was 3. So that back then I felt everything you felt. I was like, this is my fault, right? Am I the reason why they're breaking up? Is it, I had to kind of quote unquote choose, right? In a sense, like obviously the court sided with my mother, and that's who I ended up staying with. But ultimately, every time my dad came to see me at that time, he would tell me things like, "Oh, it's your mother that's not letting me see you," right? Or like, you can make a choice, do I want to live with me or not? Like, there's a lot of those decisions that, again, as a 7-year-old, you shouldn't be doing it, and definitely not anything younger than that, right? So, for a very good portion of my life, like my childhood life, I had thought that I needed to do a lot to get my parents' love. I felt like I needed to, because like as a child, you're dependent on your parents to provide and to care for you, right? So if for whatever reason you think that your family unit is fragile, right, and the divorce is perhaps the most fragile thing that you could possibly experience for a family, at the time, it was very hard for me to understand that, hey, my place in the family is permanence. It was very, very hard for me to understand that. Even though my mom told me that she loved me, even though my dad told me he loved me, it was so hard for me to actually believe that, hey, if they can divorce each other, they can divorce me too, right?
See.
So took me a very long time to kind of work with it and figure out like, okay, you know what? I can, still, like, they still love me, right? They've taken care of me for a long time throughout my life. They have tremendous, ways to show me their care and affection. Maybe that's not in the way that I might have appreciated it then, right? I didn't understand it then.
Yeah.
But what happened though is that shaped my own definition of what love was. Because what happens is, what I've realized is, the people you grew up with, whether it be your family, your childhood friends, or your siblings, the way that they demonstrate love to you is going to be how you're going to show love to other people, because you have no other way to interpret it.
Absolutely.
Right? So if your brother maybe or your sister like grew up like, punching you on the shoulder and that's the way they show love, you're going to do that to your friends, right? Because you think that that's how the world works.
Yes.
If your dad, showed you love by like disciplining you or forcing you to do something, hey, that might be how you might treat your kids, right? If you don't think deeper about it, because you think that's the way you show love to a child. You get them to do whatever you want, right? Again, different generation, different perspectives perhaps. But what I've learned throughout my entire experience, like, eventually I made terms with it. Like I said, like you said, I fully believe everyone who should get divorced should divorce, like 100%. Like if you're thinking about it, just divorce, right?
Yeah.
Like I don't think it would have been a happy family unit if they did stay together. But again, at that time, I didn't realize that. But now looking back, I'm like, okay, well, that shaped me. I'm a much stronger person now, certainly. I needed to learn loss at a young age, right? And also on top of that, I needed to learn that I was enough, just me. Because for a long, long time, I felt like I had to prove myself to be loved by someone, right? And it all stemmed from that relationship with my parents. So I think all things considered, like wrapping it all up for this specific bit, is that like, I think it's very telling how your upbringing can change a child. Like, I really liked what you said about like, the chain, right? Of like, your parents are shaped by their parents, shaped by their parents, and shaped by their parents. And actually, I had a really good opportunity in the past 2 years to speak a lot with my grandmother. And my grandmother's in Hong Kong, and I spent some time with her, and I was really able to understand, like, okay, how did she raise my mother to make her the way she is? And then now looking at my mother and looking at me and my sister, right? And me and my sister stayed with my mother primarily. How do we end up, growing up? And then how can we kind of break the chain for the next generation? So maybe that's where we can go. Like, I'm so curious, like, what are some things that you're going to do differently? Like the lessons that you've learned. Yeah.
I love that topic of like breaking the sometimes even karmic knots or just generational trauma or things we have learned, but we can change that in this new generation. So I think without any judgment or grudge towards my parents, absolutely not. I have only gratitude for them.
Yes.
And I mean it, but I also, I think what I would do is, what I would do better or differently, I guess, is that I would give that kid more love, like more. I think I felt what you felt about that need of unconditional love. So I had to actually, because that didn't happen, because I didn't receive that as I think I would have liked to receive it. As an adult, I had to do a lot of inner child work to give my inner child that safety, that love and appreciation that I felt I didn't receive when I needed it.
Yes.
So I think that for my kids, I would go the extra mile to make them feel very, very safe, very accepted as they are. And what else I would do differently? I would keep the adults' problems with the adults. I think that as a 7 or 8-year-old, I was exposed to very high level conflict. And my childhood ended up very quickly because I was already worried about my parents' situation and I was trying to understand rationally what was happening. I also put the blame on me when I thought it was my fault. So I think I would keep that. So one, give more love, unconditional, say like a lot of love, just lots of love. Yeah, like I'm very like also affectionate in many ways, words, touch, presence, gives just, because, I think my husband told me the other day, isn't it sometimes too much? Because I told him that I have an auntie in Mexico that when I was a kid, she would always just really come and pamper me a lot and tell me a lot of compliments like how beautiful you are, you're amazing, so cute, and you're my favorite, like blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
But I remember until now that every time I saw her, I felt good. I felt confident. I felt worthy and valuable and appreciated, and that someone actually sees that word on me.
Yeah.
So for me, there's no too much love. And then, the second, it would be like when a conflict comes, I would make it a priority with my partner. Like I would have some sign or something like, let's talk this later. Like we as adults, not with the kids, because they absorb it a lot. We think they don't, but they do.
I love that. And it's definitely coming from a place of love, right? And I think it's really interesting that you also mentioned like the different forms of love you can give, because I really do think that your love language as an adult is shaped by how you receive love as a child, as I mentioned before. And so I wonder then, with a child that has received 5 different forms of love languages from their parents, how they might manifest that in their relationships. I'm really curious on that. Like what would then make them feel the most loved?
It's really nice. Like there was once I heard this in a podcast where she said that if you imagine being on Earth, it's just a split second. If someone tells you that, you would want to experience everything, right? You want to experience every emotion, like the good and the bad and the grief and everything, because it's just so beautiful. So I think that is the beauty of it. I'll look at it that way. Yeah. Now, I'd just like to add on with what both of you mentioned, because I think it's really beautiful. Like I've not experienced it. So I think being a 7-year-old and being a 3-year-old to have gone through such experience at a young age, I can only, I just want to give a virtual hug to the inner child, because I do a lot of inner work as well. And I know how lonely I have felt without my dad around. And like, there was never, like you mentioned, they don't compliment me in my family at all. And for them, they are very proud of me, but that's just not their way. But when an aunt or someone says even a small thing like, oh, she's actually very good, I get so happy. I totally relate. Like I feel like, I get so hurt and feel. And I've always like had arguments with my mom. Like, why can't you tell me? You appreciate every child in the neighborhood, but except your own daughter. Yeah,
which is not true. It's not true. It's just a different way to express it.
Exactly. Like they just don't say it. But in hindsight, I also feel like their approach have helped me, because like I went through a life crisis, I would say, which was a failed marriage at the age of like 23, 24. And I've always wanted my parents to sit down with me, like my dad, and say, it's my fault, because it was an arranged marriage. Like he never said that. And when I face situations, like for example, for an Indian culture, you're supposed to wear like a chain to say that you're married. So there was once
the Mangal Sutra, you mean?
Yeah, Mangal Sutra, yes. So there was once.
Very well versed.
Yes.
My husband is Indian, I don't know if you know.
Yes.
So I have a Mangal Sutra anyway.
Yeah, nice. So there was once, I think it was Deepavali or something, I didn't wear it. And one of the aunt who came, she literally asked, why are you not wearing it? And I was so broken. And my parents never really like felt angry for me. because she crossed the boundary. And I had the grudge for like a year. I'm like, but now when I think about it, I feel like it was the strength that they showed me, because there was once my mom told me that if you want us to sit down and cry with you, we can, but you're going to feel even more broken, right? So for their perspective is they are extremely hurt inside. But if they are going to show the hurt to me when I'm crying, it's just going to be me going down
So
further.
this is a great example of the baggage.
Exactly.
Because they have that belief, that baggage, but that's their perspective. But maybe now you, in the future, if you want to become a mother, you realize that there's no weakness in being vulnerable. Maybe what all needed there is just to cry together for once and release the energy.
I would have felt so much like, okay, my family is with me. But at that point, I didn't feel it. But then again, I have like mixed opinions over it. I feel like it's a good balance. That's why I feel even for my future kids, it's about how my future kid is, right? And what my kid needs. I cannot just... My idea of love and my love language might be different. Like I would want to be heard, but what if my future kid do not need that, right? So again, I think it keeps changing. There's no book for parenting. You're going to do parenting wrong anyway. So you just need to learn from and don't do the obvious things. Like for example, if you're having a fight or something, do it privately, especially at a young age. But
even then, me saying this, I might one day do it because it's not easy. And so I think that very important to also know that when your parents are doing what you just said, they come from a place of love. I think it's very important to remember that. And I have a very funny and recent example about language of love from parents, because it was Christmas recently, right? So my mom language of love, of expressing, not of receiving, but of expressing her love, is gifts. And she sent from Mexico, like 17,000 kilometers or something, a big parcel of stuff for my husband and I. But I mean, I hope she doesn't hear this, but like 80% of the stuff inside, we don't like it.
Yes.
And my husband was like, why don't we tell her that either she gives us the money or just let us choose or something? And I have tried to explain to him, I know my mother, I have tried, but telling this to her is like kicking her in her stomach, because let her do. This is like, I see the stuff, okay, it's not my style, I don't like it, but I can see her picking it with so much love and sending it from Mexico to here.
Yes.
So it's also about it's also about understanding how parents express their love and not wanting to change them, just accept them. If that is happy and she makes them happy, then thank you, Mom, thank you so much. Yeah, I mean, I don't know how to approach it.
Okay, I love this conversation. Thank you so much for opening this one, because I think I have a lot of insight here, because I've been through very similar things and I found what kind of works and what doesn't. So let's see if I can share it to you in a way that might make sense for you and the audience, because I think many of you guys have experiences. And just to be clear, the experience is someone has sent you a gift. It's very extravagant. You don't particularly like the gift, but you feel like you'd have to say, oh, I love it so much. Or you tell them that you didn't like it and maybe it hurts their feelings, right?
Yeah.
So the way that we can understand this phenomenon is everyone wants to belong, right? That's a fundamental need for everybody. Everyone wants to feel like they're part of a community. And I think what a lot of mothers do really well is that they understand that need and they want to give that need and fulfill that need for everyone around them, and most especially their kids, right? So the way that your mom is currently trying to fulfill this need is saying, okay, what keeps us together as a family is the gifts that we give to each other, right? And no matter how far away you are, I want you to remember I care about you, right? So I'll make the effort to send something all the way from Mexico to Singapore where you are, so that you know that you're remembered and you're cared for. And so that's her way of expressing that, hey, you belong, right? But the thing is, everyone has a different understanding of what belonging is. You actually understand this from her perspective. You're very empathetic to her because you grew up with this. Maybe you saw it in your environment, in your household, maybe in extended households. Gift giving is a very common thing. And you get that, hey, even if the gift that you're getting isn't necessarily what you want and what you need, you get what it means. You get the intention behind it. Yes. And the situation, though, is that now as you have married, right, someone else that hasn't grown up in that culture, and nobody's going to grow up in the exact culture, even if you marry like a Mexican person, it's not like they're going to immediately understand, because everyone has a different family background.
Correct.
And so what's happening here is that, he has a certain upbringing, right? And maybe his upbringing was, hey, I feel loved that I get something functional, right? If I got something that will help make my life better, then that's what I would have appreciated. And that's how you can show me that you love and care for me. So maybe he might come and approach us and say, you know, like you said, how maybe she can just send us some money. Maybe she can just send us something different, like something that, you know, if the intention was to give, then there are many other things she can give that we could appreciate. And now, of course, your perspective is, oh no, if I say that to her, maybe her feelings will be hurt. Maybe it's a bit blunt, right?
Yeah.
So I've actually found something that really works in this scenario, and it comes actually from a place of curiosity. So what happens is everybody has a different kind of stage of, I call it like the 4 A's. There's the 4 A's of, you know, understanding a situation. The first one is avoidance, right? So typically if someone is in the avoidance stage of something, you know, they don't even want to talk about it. They don't even think about it in deeper. So let's say you ask your mom, you say, hey mom, you know, how come you send us these gifts, right? You know, what are you looking to accomplish with these gifts or something like to that degree? And if she says, hey, it's just a tradition, then she's not ready for a conversation. It's just pure, it's just coming out of a mechanical, you know, thing that's happening. She hasn't thought more about it. She's in avoidance mode. You don't ask any more questions. She's like, great, thank you for your gift. Move on, right?
Yeah.
But if she's saying something like, oh, actually, mi amor, I'm doing it because I love you, right? I do it because I care, then you can have a conversation. That means she's in the awareness stage. She's understanding that there's a reason behind her behavior.
Avoidance, awareness.
Yes, avoidance, awareness is the second stage, right? And then so that means that she's aware of her actions. She's aware that what she's doing is an attempt to love you and to care for you and to show that you're cared and you belong. Okay, you can work with that. So then you start asking her questions like, okay, wow, thank you. You know, I really appreciate that you care for me. You know, how do you think, it comes off? How do you think your gifts is showing me that you care, right? Do you think, you know, I like these kind of things, you know, would you appreciate, you know, these kind of gifts if they're given to you? So you start asking questions that basically help her understand that, oh, you know, yes, I'm aware that this is for love, but she needs to accept, and this is the next A, the third A, which is she needs to accept that she might not be doing something that is exactly love to you, right? And so if you ask those questions in a way that's gentle, right? Instead of saying, oh, I don't like it, I don't want it, you know, you didn't do good for me. But instead you come about it from, wow, I really appreciate you cared for me. Do you think this is the, you know, best way to care for me? Or do you think this will make me happy? Or what other gifts do you think would make me happier? Or what do you think would make Asim happy, your husband? Like these kind of questions will essentially let her to start thinking about it. It's like, oh yeah, how well do I know my daughter? How well do I know my son-in-law? You know, are these the things that they would really truly appreciate? Or is there something different? And then so the most beautiful thing is as they process this, and again, it might not be an overnight thing, but as they process this, they will eventually come back to you and say, my love, mi amor, you know, is there something else I can do for you to show you that I care? And when that question comes out, that means that they're trying to take action on what they've learned. They've learned that they are doing something out of love. They've accepted that it's perhaps not the exact way that other people might want to experience it. And from a place of absolute kindness, right? Not from a place of like rejection. It's a place of kindness and a place of from where she can then process and think, oh, maybe there's other ways I can show them the love that I so desperately want to give them. And I think that's like the way that has helped me a lot, because now in the relationships I have, in the different situations I find myself in, I find myself being able to apply this even to myself, where I'm like, maybe an initial reaction I had to a situation where I had felt unloved, or I felt like, why are they doing this to me, right? Then I turn it around, and maybe if after processing a bit, I realize they actually love me so much, right?
Yes.
And I think that's just like a very interesting way to kind of change a perspective of the world, and also do it in a way that's empathetic and loving, and just really caring for someone else.
I love that, Conrad. I love that, because I think I can resonate in two ways with what you said. One is that I was just talking to a friend last night. She's right now in Vienna, and she was telling me that she was having some trouble with her mom. And but I told her, as long as there is love, which is the love there, and what the love you just said, it's coming from a place of love, you guys can figure it out. So, and then the other part is that I need to work on is having this difficult conversation, because it's not going to be an easy conversation. I know that. Mm-hmm. So I need to be able to have the hard conversation. And I love when you said pure kindness, like just pure kindness leading to a more meaningful action, because of course in the future it would be better for all of us if we understand each other's languages of love, rather than she just sends things that actually I gave away to someone, like because I didn't use it. And I think she would appreciate that I say that, so that I actually use what she sends with so much love. And it's not about the clothes, it's about the gesture, yes, but it's just better to, if you have the love, you can talk to each other without being afraid of losing the person. But it is true that these tools that you gave are important, because sometimes we can have good intentions, but how you handle these difficult conversations can be tricky, because we have emotions and expectations. So getting the tools to be equipped to these tricky emotional conversations are important. And I also want to mention, it just came to me right now, a quote, no, it's not a quote, it's something that Guru in Bali told me about parents.
Interesting.
Yes, this was a couple of years ago. And so this guru, we were having a retreat on yoga and meditation, and she said that her guru told her, like, if you feel that you're enlightened, if you feel that you're centered, just take a plane back home, spend 1 week with your parents, and you see what is to be triggered again. And I realized that even like the gurus feel like we're always triggered by parents, right? Because there are all these things that, as you were describing, it's not, if I tell my mom, hey mom, thank you for what you sent, but to be honest, don't bother because blah, 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 blah. She will be hurt. So parents can be triggering, but learning some tools it's important to, not to mess it up. Like, we can avoid hurting others.
Yeah, 100%. And I think like what you said there was really important, is that everyone does things with their best intention. I really believe that, right? Everyone thinks they're doing what's best, whether it be for them, for others, whatever it is, but everyone thinks they're doing their best. I think that's fundamentally the case. And so I think there's two tools here specifically. The first tool is like, asking a question versus saying something, right? Which is, if you go in, like you said, and guns blazing, even if you put in the thank you at the beginning, they're not going to hear it. All they hear is someone telling them that, they suck, they wasn't good enough,
et cetera, et cetera.
You don't want that. Nobody wants that. Nobody wants to hear that. You don't want to say that either. So the first tool is ask questions instead, right? Oh, thank you. Why did you do this? How did you feel when you're doing it? What were you trying to, and then if they say, just play off whatever they say, right? You're just basically getting them to tell you the story of what they were trying to accomplish instead of, just telling them
the curiosity,
what you feel.
What you were saying.
Yes. But the second thing is the type of question is actually important depending on where you see them at, right? So again, if you're seeing them that like, they're very adamant, it's just a tradition, they're going to do it no matter what, you're not getting through to them. That's fine. So you just simply comment on the situation, right? Oh, okay. Yeah, it's great. I appreciate that you sent this over, thank you. And, it's, and then, maybe ask them more questions about like, how did you wrap it? How do you do things? Just get them to think about like the action of doing it. And then eventually they'll get to a stage where they're like, okay, well, interesting. I really did do it. Because maybe they turn off their brain, right? Maybe they turn off their brain. I'm just wrapping this. This is my, yearly thing. I'm sending gifts to everybody. It doesn't matter if, they're in Mexico or they're in China or they're in wherever, I'm going to send gifts. So if it's mechanical, if you tell them to talk about the process of how they were wrapping the thing, how they picked the gift and those things, that will get them to start thinking about the process more, I guess, with more intention.
My fear is that she will stop doing it because, okay, I'm just telling about the clothes that I didn't like, but inside the parcel, there were other beautiful gifts.
Yes.
Like pictures of us in my wedding, a card written by her, and just very beautiful things that I was even crying.
Yeah.
So my fear is that if I tell that, okay, there were all this other stuff that I really don't need, and I gave away, my fear is that she would feel like, might as well not even do.
I got it. So here's what you can do here, right? I think it's very good. And I'll pass you as well after. So the question could be, it's like, oh, mom, which of the gifts did you think I liked the most? Right?
Oh.
And then she can talk about that.
I like that.
So it's not a negative perspective, but you love something, right? And then she'll give her impression of it. Maybe she thought the clothes was part of that. And then you're like, no, mom, actually, I just loved the pictures.
Yeah.
The pictures are so beautiful.
Yeah.
Thank you for those memories. It's beautiful, right? And then she started thinking, wow, I got such praise, not on the whole gift. Because again, that's where a lot of people do it poorly. They just get complimented on the whole gift. I don't know what, I put everything in the gift, so I'm gonna repeat the same thing next year, right? I have no idea what was good, what was bad. I'm just gonna give
This is
the whole
so
gift.
insightful. Like it doesn't feel like a helpless situation anymore, to be honest.
Yes. Did you want to add something?
Thank you. Yes, I wanted to add something, but it might be of a different approach that I've been practicing recently. Because yes, I did go through all these love languages and I tried to explain it to my sister and my family. Like, my love language is words of affirmation and physical touch. And it don't have to be cuddling, but it just like, that's just me. But I tried to explain to them. But I realized now, recently, what I've been practicing is acceptance. So maybe if I put myself in your shoes, the way I look at it is like, I try to understand the effort that goes in, like behind she getting all the gifts. And it's like choosing your battles in a way, right? Like that's a bit different. Like, I've been trying to practice that.
Yeah, do you mind if I add something? Okay, again, this is a really pivotal point of this podcast. I think it's really good, and I want to explain why. So the point of this podcast is we are putting together 3 people with very different experiences to come together and show our different perspectives of the situation. I'm not saying whatever I just shared earlier, asking questions, is going to come immediately to you, or is it going to be easily doable? I'm going to explain why. When you're in a family situation, like you said, it's often very much expectation-based, right? You expect your parents to love you a certain way. You expect your family to be there for you. You expect many, many things, because it comes out of childhood. It comes out of your own, experiences growing up. So what happens is that, and Priya, I'll use you as an example just now, is that there's a lot of things that you wish your parents could have done better, of course, right? You also are trying your best to accept that that's not something they can do right now. And you're trying your best to understand that that's from your perspective, yes. And so this is very important, actually, and I'm going to try my best to explain it, but it's okay if it doesn't make sense to you or to everyone else right now. It will make sense at some point, and I'm just hoping to plant these seeds in your mind, okay? It's very important. So right now, there is still a very real emotional response coming from you in that, hey, there is something I don't appreciate about this situation. That's the truth. You're not going to put it away. And right now, what you're trying to do is you're trying to say, hey, but there's probably a good explanation for it. There's probably a good reason, it's whatever.
So you're trying to justify
You're trying to justify them for yourself, from yourself, right? So it's still all your own perceptions of the situation. So why I'm saying that's a stage we all have to go through, by the way. I'm not saying that's something that's wrong. I'm saying that that's the first stage, right? It's like, hey, someone did something to me. I'm going to feel angry about it first. Maybe the first reaction someone will have is like, I feel angry. I'll snap back, whatever it is. I think you're doing the next stage of that, which is, okay, I'm not going to snap back, but it still kind of hurts. And I'm going to just try to process it internally and try to figure it out. What I'm just sharing is that once you're ready, once you have processed it enough to a degree where you are feeling comfortable enough to go and ask them a question, you go and ask that question, and you might just find that all your assumptions about what they were thinking could be challenged as well. Because right now what you're saying is, because they had that experience and because they had that, I think that's what they're doing. And a lot of things are going in your mind, and they might not be wrong. They're 100%. They're your perceptions, which is, again, very real. But what I'm trying to offer as a tool is, as you develop your your way of approaching the world, as you develop the levels of thinking you might be going through, what's super helpful at the end of the light at the end of the tunnel, right, where it's not so helpless anymore, is when you get out of your own head and you ask them what they think, and then things will just unlock from there. And it's not as difficult of a conversation as you might think. And I really urge everyone to just try it once, right? Just try asking a question versus telling them something. Yeah.
Yes. I understand. And I think it's a beautiful skill that I learned from you, which is to ask questions out of curiosity. But what I was trying to explain is more of like, even the asking of questions is just personally me. Like I said, everyone has different perspectives, right? So this is my perspective. I feel like, okay, for example, I love food. Food is my love language. And I visit my parents once a week because they stay here as well. And my mom makes all my favorite food as much as possible. And she gives me so much to bring back home. And I realized she knows that these things are my favorite and she's making it with so much of love. So she's trying, right? She knows. But there was never really like a communication where, hey, I want this to be made. So she is trying to meet me at that point. But I do get what you're trying to say as well. Like I'm just saying that if let's say one day like she does something that is not exactly what feels like love to me, I feel like I have I used to explain to them, okay, you know what, I don't really feel loved, but now I feel like certain things I do not explain to them, because as long as they are happy and they feel loved, I just genuinely I'm okay with that discomfort. Like that's what I'm trying to say. But this is my perspective. Like I say I'll go through that discomfort. I'm like, okay.
So you're basically saying that because you love them, you want to not give them a hard time. You just want to give them some slack. Like that's fine.
Yeah, but not all the time. I'm human, right? I've been very like, but sometimes, like you said, I'll just be like, okay.
I would call that like, sounds like you're having compassion for them. Like, I can agree with that. I mean, I don't know if that's the right thing to do or not, but sometimes I feel that to my dad, for example. Like, I wish sometimes he would call me more, or I wish sometimes he would be less trying like control decisions. But then I realized like, this is his way of being, and why am I going to give him a hard time? Like, it's okay, you know, like I don't wanna torment him.
Exactly.
So, but I guess as you said, we need to be careful because I also don't want to not have boundaries.
Yes, your boundaries to be crossed.
Yes.
Totally agree.
And so I think it's a bit of having that situational awareness on like when is a good moment to do.
Exactly.
Yeah, like time and circumstance, how important this is to me.
Exactly.
Because then it's always also painful, like even in a marriage, like I cannot expect my husband to always be how I want him to be. So sometimes I give him
It's like
slack.
choosing the battles, right? Like, I mean, that's how I look at it.
Yeah,
like, exactly
in the
whatever
beginning
you
of the
said.
marriage,
Yeah.
I did try to express a lot, but we were then just fighting a lot. So then it's just like, you know, I'm just going to accept my husband. This is the husband I had. Like sometimes, for example, in the beginning, I would just feel so frustrated because he loves to leave his socks around the house. And if I had 50 cents for every sock I have picked off the floor, I would have a car. and like
so
we just
cute.
thinking, can you put the socks there? Like then it's like, okay, I realized he just doesn't. And then I realized, okay, if this is my husband's flaws, I'm very lucky.
Exactly.
Like this is not as bad. So it's okay. So same for parents. I think that sometimes I'm like, okay, I don't want to change her. I want to accept her. And this is not as important to me. So I think it's not 100% we need to have every single conversation because it's going to be painful, and we also need to, we are not perfect ourselves, right?
Exactly.
But then there are other things where I do think it's worth giving a shot, and as you said, we might be surprised that it wasn't as painful as we thought, right? And I've had those pleasant surprises with not only parents, but for family, friends, where, you know, you are like, you know, this, that, and then they're like, thanks for letting me know. I'm glad you brought it up. And
they had no idea.
They had no idea. How are they going to know if we never tell them, right?
Yes.
So, again, this is a very pivotal moment. I love it so much. And I appreciate both of your opinions so much in perspectives, because they're beautiful perspectives and perspectives that we all feel. And I myself have gone through it so many times as well, I can tell you. So absolutely resonate. So maybe I can share from a little bit of a alternative and additional perspective as well, because I think it's very interesting. So what I always aim to say is that there is no one right solution to every situation, right? So I 100% agree in like the concept of picking your battles, okay? So it doesn't mean that every single thing you need to call out, every single thing you need to address. There are things that we can live with, there's things that we cannot live with, and it just depends on our boundaries. 100%, those are important lessons to learn.
Yeah.
So, but what I want to share here, and perhaps is a more like analytical way to see this, because again, I think like where people usually feel like they're helpless is you're lost, right? You feel helpless when you're lost. You don't know what to apply in what situation. The things that used to work doesn't work anymore, you know? Like, what am I supposed to do in this situation? So I kind of want to break it down and help everyone understand. And again, no right or wrong answer, but more so like how do we develop in our thinking? Because I think it's very important to understand that. So I think everybody develops from a place like, again, I'll kind of jump to the middle of development. So I'm not talking about the childhood phases. I'm not talking about those things. But let's say when you get into your teenager years and you're starting to enter like society in a way, what you're learning is you need to get things for yourself, right? You realize that, you know, you're really the only one that's properly looking out for you, aside from your parents, of course. And if you want something, you need to tell people, you need to go get it yourself, right? So that's what we learned. We kind of go through like a transactional state in life where we're just trying to figure out how the world can give us what we want. So we learn how to ask questions to get what we want, or tell people what we want. Sorry, don't ask questions. You learn how to tell people what you want, right? And so what happens there is that, you continuously go into like maybe the workplace, right? And you keep telling like, hey, I want a raise, I want a promotion, I want all these things, and no one gives them to you. And you're like, right? And then you go to relationships and you say, I want to be loved this way, I want to do that thing, I want that thing. And then, nobody's loving me the way I want. So then you start thinking about it, well, what will solve this? And typically where your mind will go is, well, if I just found people like me, then I don't need to have this problem. If I find someone that has the absolute compatibly fit, if I have a company that's absolutely compatibly fit, if I have a family that's absolutely compatibly fit, then I won't have a problem anymore. So you start looking for belonging, you start looking for tribes, you look into religions, you look into social groups, whatever it might be. And then that's how you hope that you can solve the need to tell someone what you want, right? To get what you want.
Yeah.
But then what happens eventually is you realize, hey, even people in those tribes don't actually get you 100%, right? They're not going to give you 100%. Maybe they're 90% there. Like you said, maybe, you find someone perfect and there's just like this 10% that you're just trying to figure out, right? And you experiment with that. But then we learn very quickly that even telling them, explaining to them, I think every time you use the word explain, that's the vibe I get, where you're just telling them something. And I think when you tell them those things, we realize that it doesn't actually still get us the results that we want. So again, that's another layer of experience that we get. It's all just layers of experience. It's not to say you can jump immediately to whatever level, but it's more so, how do you build up your experience? So again, let's start from the beginning. So we had, that phase in our life where we told people what we wanted, we didn't get it. Then we started to find people that are like us so that we don't need to tell so much, right? And then we get 80, 90% fulfilled. And the rest of the meaning, we go back to, okay, maybe we'll just tell them for the remaining because we don't have any other tools to do it. We realize that even if we tell them, they don't do it. So then we kind of give up, right? We show like, let's just be compassionate, right? Maybe they're from a whole different perspective. I'm just going to be compassionate, let everyone do their own thing. I'm not going to tell them anything anymore, right? And we think that that's the best way to solve it at that time. 100%. I 100% agree at that moment. You will feel like that's the best way to solve a problem, is that live and let live. 80% is already good. Why question the rest? Why I need to pick my battles? So what I'm just adding on is one more layer on top of that. The time when it comes, when you realize that, hey, I want to pick my battles, but maybe that one thing in that 10% is still really important to me. And I really want this to be talked about. Not that you don't have to change, but you just want it to be heard.
Right.
Because everyone just wants to be heard. Nobody is doing these things because, maybe, yes, there's part of it that you want everybody to change and, be more like you. But ultimately, if you feel heard, things feel better. Things feel okay.
Yeah.
So the question is, how do you get heard? And the most interesting thing that I've learned from my experience is to be heard is not to talk. To be heard is to listen. If you ask a question and you specifically ask it in a way that imbues curiosity and kindness into that question, you will get the thing that you want. So I'm gonna give you an example. You mentioned your husband's socks, right? Many ways to deal with that, right? I'm sure you've tried many ways. You've tried 100%. I'm gonna name a few, and then tell me if that this makes sense to you, right? So actually, maybe you can just tell me, what did you try so far? What have you tried to get this through? Okay. I'm sure.
So obviously in the beginning, it's very emotional, very raw, not like nothing that I thought. It was just like, hey, like, why don't you just put them in the bin, right?
100%.
So just very direct, nothing special.
Yeah.
Then I was like, okay, so why is it difficult to put them in?
Yeah. Okay.
Just like that, or
no, it's great.
Out of curiosity.
Yeah, just like what else? To be honest, I was just. I'm like, I don't have time for this. I just like pick them up. I don't know. I didn't give it a lot of thought. Just very direct questions like, why don't you just put it? Why is it so difficult to put them there?
Okay, that's perfect. I love this. Let's hold that, right? So the type of questions I'm saying are not these questions, just to be clear. No, but I get where you're coming from. It's from an emotional place, and it's important that this happens, okay? Yeah. So what happened was, you don't understand what's happening. This is not a behavior you would do. This is not a behavior you expected any of your family to do, right? Yeah. Your family, people in your household, you never expected this. So therefore, your first emotional reaction is, why don't you do it, right?
Yeah.
It's just do it, right? And then maybe you get into your mind a bit, you be empathetic. Oh, maybe it's difficult for him. Because you start thinking about reasons why you wouldn't do it. So if I wouldn't do it, maybe I'm just difficult. Maybe it was just tiring that day. And those are the answers you were expecting him to say. But then he might not have answers to that, right? If you suddenly ask someone a why question and they weren't thinking enough about it,
Yeah.
again, they're in the avoidance stage. A why question is never right because I never thought about it. They don't know why. I don't know.
Yes, exactly.
You ask me why. I don't know why. I just did it, right?
Yeah.
So the question there actually, okay, well, again, let's go through the stages, right? So then you went to the stage of like, okay, I'm just going to let go of this. It doesn't matter anymore. This is the least of things. At least it's not doing all these 90 other things that I worry about, right? So that's your acceptance, certainly, 100%. And I don't think that's bad. But let's say this was this thing that you cared a lot about. Let's say that you really did want to be heard, right? Again, that's the main thing. He might not change. We're not coming in this expecting change, but we're expecting to be heard and we're expecting to understand. So a question instead might not be a why question, but it might be like, oh, what goes through your mind when you put your socks down, right? What would you like your socks to do when they get to hit the floor, right? How did you live in your household, right? When you didn't have a laundry hamper and, where the socks on the floor, how did you pick up, how did you do laundry every week? Help him kind of go through the process of understanding like, okay, what was my life before I had a wife to pick up my socks, right?
Yeah, right.
What was that process
without
like?
judgment, just curiosity, like I want to know, right?
Exactly, so you're like, okay, you're gonna do it anyway. I'm not asking you to change, but tell me
Might
how
as
we
well
got
let's
here.
talk about it.
Tell me how we got here, right? What made you this way, right? What was the process? And of course, when you're ready, if they're avoiding it, so it's like, I'll just do it. Okay, fine. Tell me when you're ready. Okay.
Yeah.
But when they are ready, I think it'll be a very interesting conversation, right? I think you might learn a lot of things, and I think in the process of him thinking about it, he's like, maybe there's something different here that maybe I could do, right?
Yeah, maybe he doesn't even know because he hasn't taken the time, and then he's like, oh, actually, now that you ask me,
yes,
so it's interesting. Yeah, I like that.
And then it turns it from nagging, right? And it turns it into, wow, my wife cares about me so much
exactly.
that she wants to know what's going on with me.
Yes, because at the end of the day, we're going to normally spend the rest of our lives together. So might as well we know each other.
Yes. Yes. More than just, that's something that my husband does, right? Because that's what ends up coming in your mind. Oh, I was just the kind of guy that puts socks on the floor, right?
Yeah.
Versus that, what you can now have is, this is what my husband is doing, and this is how he was brought up, and this is where it came from, and not just your own interpretation of things, but really from his mouth. And it just creates a world of difference in the relationship building.
And now that you mention it, I can think already of examples where he has asked me, like, okay, why do you do this? And because he doesn't understand it, little things like the equivalent of the socks.
Sure.
And then he thinks it's because I'm like annoying or not thinking. But then when he asked me, so basically he's doing what you just said, then I explain where I'm coming from. And then he realizes that I have a very specific, interesting reason. And then we discuss it. And, it's an interesting conversation. So I can think already of examples. And so I like that. I will ask next time I see some socks on the floor. I'm sure you have plenty of opportunities.
Yeah. And the most important thing is, and they just add to top it all off is, because there's already a lot of emotional responses to this experience, of course. We've had all this, right? Like many emotional experiences. The next time you ask a question, he might already be defensive, right? So the most important thing is to get into a safe space, right? Overlay of like, oh, I love you. This is not me coming to try and change you. I love you so much. I want to know why. I don't know where it's coming from.
He actually is the one that already applies this because now that you think about that you're mentioning, I think about it. I'm the one that gets defensive. So because I get defensive, because my parents, right? I grew up with fear of abandonment. I grew up feeling that I wasn't enough and all that. So he has learned to understand that. So when he wants to give me feedback, he holds me and he says like, mi amor, I love you so much.
Yes.
And that will never change. And I just want to talk about this.
Oh, that's lovely.
Yes, he's so nice.
Yes.
He's so nice.
I mean, if you start like any conflict by saying that,
then I feel safe. I feel like, okay, there's no risk.
Like nothing is going to change.
Yeah, so I think that we can also apply that with our parents because although they are the parents, some of our parents are also like inner child that never got that reassurance.
Yes. 100%.
Yeah.
I love it. Thanks for sharing so much.
Of course. That's great. Yeah. So, guys, I really want to ask because, okay, I'm from Mexico. You guys are from other regions. You have your own experiences. And I'm wondering, like, I wonder if the concept I have of parenting or of my own parents or what I want to be as a parent is the same as you have. And I don't know what the rest of the people think. So, I don't think there's an uniform. I don't think all of us in the world think this is being a parent. So I'm very curious to have your thoughts in maybe a few key sentences of what is for you, or what more like in the future for you. Let's not talk about your parents. More going forward, if you want to be a parent, what does it mean for you to be a parent?
Would you like to answer?
Yes. I would like to be a best friend to my child who makes mistakes, but at the same time, who's firm with the child. So I will have the level of firmness because of my experiences, but at the same time, I'm my child's best friend who's prone to making mistakes. I think that is how I want to deal with my future children. Like, I'm your best friend, means a friend can make mistake as well.
Yes.
So you need to be okay with that. But at the same time, I have experiences. So I will be firm with you because I do not want you to go through certain stuff. But again, yeah. So I think this is something I've thought about a lot and I'm pretty clear. Thank you for asking.
Yeah.
It really makes me like...
And when you mention best friend, I think of trust, because one of my priorities also is about how am I going to earn and maintain the trust, right? Because then kids or even us won't want to share with our parents certain stuff. So I think that the challenge there of being a best friend of your kid is that they know they can trust you, and because then if they come to you and they tell you something, if you scold them, then they will not come back again and you're losing the trust. So for me, that's the challenge of being a best friend. But yeah, that also resonates.
Yeah, I think when you make it clear that I'm your best friend and I will make mistakes, but at the end of the day, I'm also going to be firm because of the experiences I have and I have a role to play here. But at the end of the day, I'm your best friend. And I think when they realize that, it will shape a lot of their relationships as well. The way they make friends and the way they look at other people. So that's how I look at it.
Thanks for sharing, Priya.
No
How about you, Conrad?
Yeah, no, this is a really good question. I really appreciate it because I would have had a lot of different answers to this. And then I think the answer I have today is very different than my answer I would have had like years ago. So the answer I have today is that being a parent simply, to me at least, simply means being a guide. I'm simply a guide through life for them. That's, I provide for them what they need at that time. So what I mean by that is, once you're a baby, you're born, all you need is just to survive, right? So I'm here to give you your basic needs, right? I'm here to make sure you're fed. I'm here to make sure you have a, shelter, make sure that you feel those things that, will help you cultivate your life and survive. And as they grow up, I'm sure they're going to want many more things in the world. I'm sure they're going to want to experience the world their way. I'm sure they're going to have a lot of opinions about what is right, what is wrong. And I don't think my place is to really tell them what is right or wrong. My place is to help them be critical thinkers, to understand for themselves what to do and what not to do. I think a lot of my upbringing has been, I'm sure many of our upbringings totally is that, our parents think they know what's best for us, and then they try to enforce that onto us. Now, I don't think that's not coming from a place of love. That's coming from a place of security, right? They think they figure out a lot of stuff, and they're just trying to make sure that you don't have to figure out all this stuff, right? So I think it's definitely a model that is applicable. But my perspective is, and again, I hope nobody misunderstands me in that, like, oh, I'm just going to let them do whatever they want. That's not the point. But I want to be a guide in the sense that...
a compass.
Not a compass either. Like, it's more like, I want to be the kind of parent that helps their child understands why they do the things that they do so that they can make better decisions on their own without having to rely on the parent to make a decision for them. I think a lot of times when you have parents that are, very overbearing, right? It can create two situations, either a rebellious child, right? Which I'm sure I have been, and I think hearing from your stories, you have been as well. Or they can be a totally docile child, which then has no idea how to navigate the world without their parents' permission. And I think both of those are not necessarily situations I want to get myself into. So will I be firm? Depends on the situation, right? If they're about to touch, hot water and they're going to burn themselves, I'll be like, hey, I'm going to grab you for a second, right? You can touch it. It's going to be hot, right? You're going to burn yourself. Or you can listen to me and believe that it will be hot and don't touch it. And I'm sure one time they're going to try, and I'm like, okay, you try first, right? Again,
But I'm here to tell you.
I'm here to tell you, and I'm here
Yeah.
to kind of stop you from getting too burned, right? Hopefully it's not life-threatening things that you're trying, but at least you know that, hey, you know, there's something here, and there's like a cause and effect situation that maybe I can teach you. Again, different stages need different things. And one thing I really appreciate about my dad today is that he's grown a lot, and he's realized that the things that worked for him in the past to kind of train me and my brother up aren't necessarily the things that I need today, right?
Yeah.
So he has a full different perspective on that. And I just want to apply that to a younger age, right? I wish, you know, those are things that, you know, because I think the more you baby a child, the more they will be babies. I think that's something I learned. And, you know, the more, I think a very good example of this is, let's say your child trips and they scrape their knee. If you go and you start crying, you're very alarmed, they will be so alarmed.
Yes.
They will start crying because they're mirroring you. They think that that's the
Correct.
reaction, right? Versus you go, you start laughing, you start joking with them. They're like, okay, yeah, pain isn't that bad. Pain is something to, you know, work with, right? So it's just the way that you approach your child, I think, is important. And I think there's just so many ways of parenting. Like I said, there's no one right answer, but I'm more than happy to work with the child. And I don't think there's going to be one formula. Okay, this works for this child. It's going to be applicable to the next child.
Yes.
No, of course not. Like every child's different. But then what is the higher universal principle there where, you know, maybe it's just, you know, working with them and, you know, helping them, guiding them where they want to go.
I love that.
Yeah.
And you started this answer saying, like, I have so much to say on this because it is a very rich answer in the sense of, I agree with you, every stage of the child, of the son, daughter requires different things. It's different what you will give to them when they're a baby, when they're a teenager, when they're an adult. So I think the parenting role also changes. It's not always the same.
Yeah.
And I resonate also when you said being a guide. I was thinking earlier like a facilitator, but you know, I think it's easier said than done because I already know, I don't even have kids already now, but I already feel like, okay, I don't drink, I'm vegetarian, I don't smoke, and I really believe in my reasons. I respect everyone else in my family and my friends that I love with all my heart. Mm-hmm. If they drink, if they are vegetarian, and if they drink and they're not vegetarian, or they smoke or all that. But when I have kids, I would really like them to be vegetarian because I know my principles and my values. But then at the end of the day, I also know that, as you said, I'm not their owner. I don't want to take decisions for them, and I just want exactly like they're not my possession, and they're not. You know, I want to give them the chance to decide for themselves. So for me, it's going to be a challenge as a parent, and I think it's been a challenge for my parents too, to find that balance between I've gone through things, this is what I've learned, and I think it's best for you, but at the same time to, you know, not impose myself and let them figure it out. So I think it's easier said than done.
100%.
Yeah, and also something very interesting, guys, in terms of cultural parenting, is that in India, because my husband is from India, I realized that family is like so important. Once we entered to the home of a person in India, and in the entrance of the home, there was this like frame that said, family is not important, family is everything. And then in Mexico, people say, yeah, but in Mexico, you guys are also, you know, are very family oriented. I'm like, yes, in Mexico, we're family oriented, but I think in India, it's family centered. And
family is everything.
Yeah, it's like everything. And I feel that everything is around family. And I see the beauty of it. But it's a different approach because, for example, in Mexico, we say, los hijos son prestados, which means your children are only borrowed. Like,
oh, wow.
Yes.
I love that.
Like,
wow.
This is what I was saying, that different stages require different things because they say like, okay, they're not yours, they're borrowed. You will be a guide, you will facilitate, but then at some point they will fly from their nest.
Yes.
So yeah, that's and now that my husband is Indian and we're gonna be parents, you know, this might come to a rich conversation there.
Yeah.
So yeah, I just wanted to share that interesting perspective that parenting is different in every culture.
Yes. I have a really good insight on this if you'd like me to share. But also before that, have you answered what parenting is to you?
Oh my gosh. I think for me, parenting is, it's a mix, it's a yin yang, because on the one hand, I feel that I owe everything to my parents. On the other hand, I think that I owe them nothing. So, and I mean it in the
Yes,
sense of
I get
like, they gave me life, which is everything. It's the greatest gift.
Yeah.
And that's why I want to be a mother too, because I want to give that gift to another person. Like, look at this amazing world, right?
Yeah.
But on the other hand, I have taken so many decisions without them approving of it. Like, I wouldn't be here,
Sure.
right? Just I left Mexico. So in that sense, it's like, I don't know them nothing. So for me, a parent, it's at the same time almost like a god, in the sense of like, you deserve all my devotion, all my respect, all my gratitude, and all my love. But at the same time, you're just a facilitator of my life experience, where I will take my own decisions. So I don't know how to put this in one sentence, but I have those both feelings there.
Wow.
And when I'll be a mother, I'll try. I mean, I've heard it's very challenging.
Yeah.
I've heard it's like one of the, more than marriage, I've heard that being a parent, it's going to test you to the edge emotionally, physically.
Yeah.
So I'll do my best as a mother. My concept of being a parent is to be this guide, as you said, that also resonates, of like, I'll protect you when you're a baby. When you're a teenager, I'll be there for you. When you're an adult, I'll support you. But at some point, you'll take your own decisions.
I love that. It's definitely in stages, 100%. And I think it's absolutely beautiful that, I think it's great that you've recognized that, there are two ways to see it, right? It's like your parents gave you everything or they gave you nothing, right? And I think that's actually something that a lot of people feel. It's like, yes, of course, I think I saw this in one of like a Reddit thread or something. There's a lot of Reddit threads about like narcissistic parents. And they talked about like, sometimes they talk about their parents like, oh, this person that gave their seed has no right to intrude on the rest of my life.
Right.
So like, it's like that kind of dissociation, which is very extreme. Obviously, many things have happened to them. And so I totally get that, right? It can feel like, your life is your own and you built it. And just because someone, donated some, sperm and gave you life doesn't mean that that's, your end all and be all, right? Ownership. But there's the other side of it, which is like, even so, right? Their genetic, I guess, contribution to you in itself is what makes you you as well, right? So that becomes a very whole big topic that, I like that you're tackling it. I like that you're trying to gauge how to go between both. And I think that's very important. Yeah, and I love that.
Oh, thank you. But to be honest, it's the first time I think about this. Like, I'm just improvising on it. So this gives me the chance to also,
talk about it and have those important conversations. Yeah.
Definitely, yeah.
Let's talk a bit about how, like, what you identified, right? Even just between Mexico and India, the concept of what parents and family is very different. So what I've observed is that each society has a certain, I guess, level of development, right? And what I mean by that is every society is operating to the average of its common denominator. And what that means is that if everyone in the society is just trying to get by, then obviously then the nature of what a society is going to be evolving around the norms and everything is how to get by. So a lot of times when you look at countries like China or countries like India, it's very family orientated because it's everything. Because if you don't have family to take care of you, you might just starve on the street. So it's extremely, extremely important for there to be strong family values and strong bonding and strong merging. And that's built up over many generations, certainly. And we also see, though, in the West, for example, it's a lot of freedom, right? 18, leave the nest, get out of my house, right? You would never see that in Singapore or China or India, right? So the reason why that happened is because the West, got to a place where they were very productive, right, through the industrial age. And then what happened from there is that they ended up becoming very prosperous, right? So you don't necessarily need a family to take care of you because the government might take care of you. There's welfare, right? There's a lot of other support outside of the family structure. So once the burden or the pressure was released from the parents per se, or released from the family unit, the social norms started evolving around that, right? So how do you get people to be more independent earlier, right? Versus in India or in China, at least, I'm not saying these current years, I think things have changed quite a bit, but let's say 20 years ago, or even 30, 40 years ago, the way that they were really pushing the narrative was that if you don't take care of family, you will not survive. So that's what was passed down to everyone. So what I'm trying to say here is that I think it's very useful to look at history as a guide to kind of understand, the reasons of why your upbringing was the way it was. And for me, I think I was very lucky in the sense that my parents are, ethnically Chinese, but they went from Hong Kong to Canada and then gave birth to me in Canada. So they were fighting a lot with like the West and the East, right? It's the East says you should hit your child every time they do something wrong. The West says you can just let them, figure it out, right? so there's a lot of like very interesting, like, things they had to grapple with, certainly. And it wasn't easy for them either because they were brought up a certain way. And now they don't know if they should pass it down the same way they were brought up. And they're seeing all of these other people, our neighbors and whatnot, bringing up the children in just totally different ways, right? And then now you're getting married, interracial couples and all those kind of things. Like there's going to be so much merging of cultures that I think is important for us as critical thinkers to really identify what is useful and what is not in the context of your situation. So if your marriage is one that's predicated by, hey, every day we're living paycheck to paycheck and we're just trying to figure out life and everything, you might have the rule of an iron fist at home. That's just the nature of it. You don't have time, right, to consider, talk very nicely to your kids, try to hear them out. And it's not going to give the kid a good upbringing per se, but that's just the reality of it. You need to work. You're tired when you get home. You don't have all the energy in the world, and you'd have to choose between getting survival for the family or making sure that everyone's emotionally taken care of. And ideally, there's super people that can do both. I love that, and I think that's possible. But it's going to be a very minority, right? So you got to work with what you have. Versus if, the family is, perhaps a bit more, prosperous, you have the capability to have maybe one working parent and one stay at home or, whatever it might be, right? Whatever situation you find yourself in and, money isn't that tight, then do you need to follow your parents, upbringing of, trying to be super controlling, super everything? No, because you have time to spend with your children, right? Why don't you ask them some questions? Why don't you work with them and figure out where they're at and help them and be their friend and all those kind of things? But I do think where a lot of like parenting advice is falling short, and just the same with like a lot of advice out there, is that it's not one size fits all, right? It's very inconsiderate to tell someone who's like, hey, you're working 9 to 5, maybe 9 to 9, and you're a single parent and you're trying to raise your kids. And by the way, you should really, listen to them when you come home. You don't have time for that. And you need to be empathetic for that person. And you can't just half-heartedly give that advice, right? So my take on it is, understand what your situation is, understand what your parents passed to you, really dive into that. Okay, they gave me this is useful in this way. And then figure out if the situation that you can bring for your children is which tool can you use, right? They're all tools in the end. And I think what's really important here is that it's very easy for us to be reactive to something. It's like, okay, I really hated this in my childhood, therefore I'm never going to do this for my child or whatever. And I think that's not a bad thing. I think it's very normal and very human. But what I do think is if we think a bit deeper about it, there's potentially a chance that is something that might be still helpful for your future children. Yeah. And there's a chance that it's totally not. So figure it out. Yeah.
Wow, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, it really resonates. I don't know where you take this insight from. Do you have something written down?
No.
Wow, aha moment. It's like, wow, yeah.
I've thought about these things quite a bit.
And wow.
No, but like, I also think I'm very lucky to have like, many amazing experiences of people around me, or my own experiences that, I've had a lot of time to sit down and think about it. And again, I think I'm privileged in that way where I was able to have the, time to really introspect and everything. Again, not everyone has that. And hopefully, what I'm just trying to do is just share that with you guys and have you guys figure out, your own way based on what maybe you shared here. And I think with that, probably the end of this one podcast. I really appreciate Maria for coming out today and sharing so much of your wonderful experiences with us. I think so many people can learn from you. I think so many people have already, so much going on in their life, and just even hearing stories like this, hearing how we can break it down and understanding these experiences and not just feeling helpless, I think is a really big concept here. And I love that you brought us here for that. Thank you, Priya, for bringing us together as well. And anything last things you guys want to say?
Thanks to you guys really for providing this space. This was amazing, and I think that this was and is a very rich topic that I hope everyone will find some aspects to resonate with, and I would leave this podcast feeling even more self-aware. So I took a lot from you guys. Thank you for sharing. And yeah, thank you. This was amazing. And I think that after this, I might message my mom and dad in Mexico. I feel a lot of gratitude, and yeah.
I love
so
that.
thank you so much, guys. It was really fun.
Thank you. And
Yeah, I think I felt like a full range of emotions just sitting here and listening to everything. And I think it was so good. Like, felt a lot of gratitude. I felt a lot of like emotion coming up. So it felt, thank you for sharing.
Oh, of
Thank you for
course.
allowing me to share. Thank you.
Of course, yeah. There's a lot of connection and energy in this table.
Yes, I can
And
feel it.
yeah.
yeah, it's great. Thank you for organizing. It was amazing.
Thank you. And if you guys want to see Maria again, just let us know in the comments below. And yeah, we'll love to have her again and whatever topic you guys want us to talk about. With that, please take care, guys. Bye-bye.
Bye.